Hi everyone. Okay, so update on what's going on. Parents are trying to obtain a translator to translate contracts. I've been cleared medically. I met the parents a couple weeks ago. They're real nice. They're a little bit different than my last couple. My last couple was doing it for true infertility problems. This couple is not getting a carrier for infertility problems. They're doing it simply because of their age. They're older, they're in their 50s. Some people I've noticed in the groups, some girls will come in and say, would you have a problem carrying with a couple who are older, as like 50s, 60s, even sometimes 70s? I don't have a problem with that. And I think even if they had been older, I wouldn't have had a problem with it because they're like mid 50s. Because my husband's in his 50s. They're the same age as my husband. So I live with people this age and they're active, and even I don't know. That part of it just doesn't matter to me. Some girls it does matter to. Some girls that I've noticed it kind of sits sideways with them, but I'm okay with it. So they're real nice. I had a nice dinner with them and their friends. A couple of things we discussed that day, and this video is a little bit more about things that need to be discussed before you agree to match with somebody. And I goofed, you guys. I goofed a little bit because I failed to ask a very important question, or at least what I think is a very important question, what I think could have potentially ruined this match. Me and the parents basically matched due to logistical issues at the time, and we had a little communication before, and Mom said, I would love if you would work with us, and just kind of like, get to know somebody for the first time thing. We didn't really get into a whole lot of depth about wishes and what we wanted, and I should have made one of my main requests known at that point. I'm glad to see that at this point it does not appear that it has affected our match, but it potentially could have. So met the parents, discussed some things, learned a little bit. I think that perhaps maybe they didn't know everything that comes with having a surrogate and how it all breaks down, and contracts and processes. And originally I had been told they wanted to transfer in August. Well, end of August is this month, and we haven't even gotten to contract. So I found out at dinner that night that really actually an end of September, even October delivery is preferable for them, because then that puts me due in July, which works with their work schedule, which also works with my family schedule. So that part worked out really well. But there was a lot of questions about like, how does compensation work and money work, and how does your insurance work, and things that they should have known. But talking to them more about it, I understand why they don't. They had only just gotten with the agency, and I think they were doing everything on their own beforehand. And I reached out to my agency after we had dinner and said, I said, I'm not 100% if it's actually coming from them or if it's coming from their friend, but I think they might still have questions about how this whole process works. But they're still on board and they're still moving forward at this point. So I haven't heard anything different. It sat a little sideways with me at dinner. So I really made sure I reached out to my agency, and she reached out to the parents coordinator side of the agency, and they reached out together. So it's kind of like a group effort with Central Coast, where the IP coordinator is working real close with the surrogate coordinator, and everybody's talking to each other. Everybody's talking to everybody. So I don't just deal with my surrogacy coordinator, and they don't just deal with their IP coordinator. They all work together, and everybody's in on the communication. So they reached out privately without me in the conversation, and made sure that they had all their questions answered and got it all square, because they said, you shouldn't have to explain that to them. They, we discussed it beforehand, and if they have more questions, then we need to make sure that they have those questions answered. So that's what happened there. But during dinner, it came to my attention, like it dawned on me. I'm a little embarrassed, you guys, and I am probably going to get a lot of heat back for this. Please do not jump in my comments feed and just blow me up. I understand everybody's opinion on this. I understand the majority opinion on this. Unfortunately, the majority opinion is not my husband's opinion. And while it is my body and I have final say, I do respect my husband's requests in some of these things. He only had 2 requests in this process. I have to give it to him, and I had to ask and see if we were on the same page, or if there was some type of middle ground that we could meet on if we were not. So it dawned on me as I was driving over to dinner to their house that night that I had failed to ask the key component. With my previous delivery, I didn't even think that my husband would have a problem having the father of the child in the room when I delivered. I should have known, because my husband is very weird about private parts. He's very weird about modesty. He's very weird about what he calls sharing his cookies. Like, to him, there's no excuse to be breastfeeding in public. You need to keep it covered. You need to go somewhere else. That doesn't need to be exposed. So I should have known. It was my fault. But it worked out really well last time because the father didn't want to be in the room. He said, absolutely not. I want to respect your privacy. That's yours, as long as my wife's in there. And we were perfect. It worked out perfect. Well, I didn't discuss that with this family before we agreed to match. And so at dinner, I brought it up and I asked the friend to translate so that they understood. And I explained, and I said, I'm so sorry I didn't say anything earlier, but I have to respect my husband in this at some point. And he only has this one request, and his one request is that if you could please wait outside until my private areas are covered. And he understands what he's asking of you, and he knows that that's hard to not be there when your child is born, but it makes him very uncomfortable. It makes him uncomfortable, you guys, even with my male physician being in the room. That was a huge point of discussion during my pregnancy with my husband. He pushed really, really hard for me to change physicians just so he was comfortable with, or at least more comfortable with, the physician being a woman rather than a man. And I told him, absolutely not. I will go with the one that I'm comfortable with and the one that I know will keep me out of the operating room and keep both me and this baby alive. Not that any of them wouldn't do that, but I knew the relationship with my physician was going to be a little bit better than with any of the other physicians that were covered and came to my facility. And he gave me that pass because he knew I know better than him in this. But this, he's like, look, I get it, but just until you're covered, please. Like, just as soon as you're covered, let the placenta come out and let them cover you up, and he can come right back in. Not a problem. And I explained that to them, and they said, well, can mom be in there? I said, absolutely, mom can be in there. Speaking to her friend, can be in there. Her support can be in there. We just don't want extra male presence in the room. And I really appreciated his response. I really hope it was genuine. And I brought it up to my agency as well, because I wanted to make sure that he didn't feel like he had to agree to that we could come to a middle ground if it was an absolute hard no, he's going to be in that room. And we were like, no, I just want my private areas covered. He responded back to me in English, and he said, no, I understand. I am a husband too. And he kind of motioned towards his wife. That spoke a lot to me. Because that's a hard thing to ask somebody, to please not be in the room when your child is being born. And it was really difficult for me to discuss, but it had to be discussed before we moved forward with legal and more of these in-depth things. So it had to be asked, because I would have hate to got to delivery room and there's a big scuffle or whatever, and we're going, hey, please go outside. But he said he understood. And speaking to my agency, my agency works almost exclusively, I think, with international, mainly Chinese parents. And this is an older couple. They're a little bit more traditional. They're not the younger generation that is a little bit more Americanized in their thoughts and practices. And talking to my agency more, she said the majority of these couples, especially these older couples who are more traditional, they don't go in the room even when it's their own wife. She said very few of the Asian fathers, the Chinese fathers, are in the room at delivery. So that made me feel a little bit better, but I really emphasized to her, look, when you reach out to them, make sure that they understand, this isn't a hard no and a hard you can't be in there. It's a hard, I just want my privates covered before he comes prancing in the room or from behind the curtain, And I made sure, I said, because it's really important to me that he doesn't feel like he has to say yes just to keep me on board. We see that sometimes where surrogates have these crazy demanding requests, or at least it appears so. And the parents don't want to say no because they don't either want to break the match, or the girl is already pregnant and they feel like they're in between a rock and a hard spot. So it was real important to me that they really emphasize that. And I tried to explain that night, that, if you really want to be in there, we can adjust if we need to, but I just really don't want my vagina hanging out. But no, they just kept saying, no, he understands that. Mom wants to be in there. That would be awesome. And I was like, absolutely. I would never dream of taking that away from her or him. But in essence, I am kind of taking it away from him. And if I have parents who are following this thread, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the men in there. It's just, I also have to respect my husband a little bit. And if this is the only thing I ask, then it's literally the only thing I ask. I don't ask much. I'm open to just about everything else as long as it's safe and it's deemed necessary. And I'm a very flexible person, but this is just the one thing. My husband had 2 requests. He didn't want to work with gay couples, and he didn't want dad in the room with my vagina out. Those are his only 2 requests in this process. Everything else he gives me. You guys have to understand, my husband is completely weirded out by this entire process. Completely. Like, he told me, he goes, the whole thing was just weird. I can't believe we're doing this again. It's just weird. He didn't tell people because he didn't know how to explain it. He didn't tell his work. He didn't tell his boss. We hid that pregnancy everywhere we went so people in town would not see us and would not see it. And like, we went above and beyond because my husband's comfort level was like just awkward. Like, when we first started, when we told our really close friends, we have just maybe 2 or 3. He goes, Ginger, the guys were asking me about this. He goes, I felt like I was your pimp. I laughed so hard. I'm like, babe, you're not my pimp. Nobody's pimping me out. You're not a pimp. But that's like, because that's the attitude towards it sometimes, is it's like rent a womb and we're going to make all this money off of it. And it's not that, and so after he got past that and they really understood a little bit more after I stepped in and explained it, it was easier and he didn't feel so awkward with it. But the actual physical process of it still really weirds me out. And so if he can go through this with me twice and he can do all this stuff twice with me, I have to at least try to give him his single request for the delivery room. So that's that. Again, please don't blast me. I know the majority's opinion on this. In the end, it's between me and the parents, and it's what works for us. And I am absolutely not going to force somebody to do something that they don't want to. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If this is a sticking point, but I don't think it's gonna be a sticking point. It sounds like at this point it's not. So, but it's important that you guys talk about that before you match. So if you're here researching and looking for information, it's really important that you ask questions like that. The questions that you think aren't going to be an issue, like, do you want me to have a C-section? For most of us, we think, oh, of course I'm going to vaginally deliver. But I can't tell you how many times I've seen parents come in and say, hey, look, a C-section would be best. Even though there's no medical need, C-section would be best because the timing would be good. And then we know there's not going to be any problems to the baby. And that's a huge question, like silly things like that. Like, and what if worst case scenario happens, or things that you just don't think of. That's what your lawyer's there for, and your surrogate, your agency and your support system. But even so, you have to discuss those things, and don't be afraid to ask questions that you might be a little embarrassed to ask. And, this time I wasn't sure how their pregnancy went because they had a pregnancy. And so I was like, maybe she had a rough pregnancy. No, she had a perfectly healthy pregnancy, which puts my nerves at ease, because that tells me less chance that I'm going to have a rough pregnancy. At least that's how I see it, So make sure you're discussing things like that and those little points that you probably don't even think of. And if you forget them, as soon as you remember them and you think you need to ask either via your agency or directly to your parents. Because otherwise you're going to get halfway through pregnancy like I did last time and realize that, oh my God, total misunderstanding here. I didn't think that it would be a problem. My husband absolutely is making a problem. They didn't know. They assumed that they were going to do what they were going to do. I mean, it all worked out, but none of us had actually talked about who was going to be in the delivery room, because I was going into it under the impression that their whole family was coming and going to be in the delivery room. And I was like, well, all right. I guess the whole of China is going to see my vagina. But it didn't work out like that. And we didn't know that until I was like 25, 28 weeks, somewhere around there. So that's important stuff to ask, real important stuff to ask. So make sure you're asking questions, guys. Please don't blast me. I'm sorry if I hurt anybody's feelings. And I will let you know as soon as I get contracts done. I'll probably go into a little bit more depth with my contracts, just because I don't think I did last time. So see you next time.